Well, there will, of course, be debts, including those to China for the Belt and Road infrastructure that's been a precondition for refocusing global majority trade among themselves. But the new institutions are going to make this new non-US, non-European lending part of a mutual growth process for economic resilience and independence, not post-industrial debt peonage. Now, two key policies are needed. Basically, countries never should borrow in a foreign currency. That takes monetary policy and financial allocations out of their control. Secondly is Islamic theology is recognized. Loans should be in the character of equity. The creditor should share in the risks of the debtor by taking payment in the surplus created by the debtor's use of money and other assets. In other words, there should be equity investment, or China doesn't need to be repaid for the Belt and Road in actual currency. It can say, well, we can avoid all this. You can pay in raw materials. We're going to help help you put in place a productive capacity. You can pay us repay the debt out of what you're able to create with the productive capacity that our investment has helped you create. If you are able to pay, fine. If you're not able to pay, then it won't. Now, this is not a radical idea. This was the idea of John Maynard Keynes in 1944 for the IMF when America and England and Europe met in Bretton Woods to decide the post-war economic order. Keynes said that the problem looking forward is how does the rest of the world protect itself from the United States being the major industrial power, because there was no warfare destroying the United States. The wars devastated Europe and Russia, but it hasn't devastated the United States. It's made you richer. How do we avoid falling more and more into debt to you? He said, well, under the terms of the International Monetary Fund that he designed, countries that who invest, make loans to other countries or finance them, will of course build up creditor claims. Other countries will have a debt claim. But if there is a country building up a chronic creditor claim, like the United States, then at a certain point, maybe after 5 years, the growth, all the further growth in creditor claims will be wiped out, is obsolete. And the debts of countries that are in chronic debt because they're losing in the World Economic Order, like England is what he had in mind, their debts will be canceled. Well, that's something like that will be what China and other leading investing countries will do. They'll say, okay, if we end up with so top-heavy claims on the other countries, these claims will be wiped out. We realize that we can't, the purpose of this new economic order is not simply for China to replace the United States. No country should be so financially dominant that it's in a position to control other countries. So China will agree that if to the extent that its investments in these countries do not enable them to pay the debts without suffering, without having to roll back their living standards, without having to sell off in their own assets to pay, that the debt simply will be wiped out. That condition, it's not like bankruptcy. Keynes had very clearly described how just the bank would realize we don't want chronic creditors to develop. We don't want chronic debtors to develop. We will continue to restore economic balance by just wiping out the debt. That's how the whole world and especially the Middle East, operated for 3,000 years. Every new ruler would cancel the debts and free the debtors, give them their liberty. That's basically how civilization began, and it's the kind of civilization that the new civilization that will be created as an alternative to the West. Now, the BRICS Bank can meet these criteria. I've discussed this in earlier reports for Global University on my Globalization Economy Hour with Ben Norton's website and my own website. The BRICS Bank will provide balance of payments credit in its own electronic currency to countries along lines similar to those that Keynes described. If loans go bad, and some countries, such as China, end up with one-sided creditors, their claims on countries that remain one-sided debtors will be wiped off the books as an example of unsuccessful credit. That's the only way that you can avoid debt dependency over the long term. And by doing that, you want to make sure that there will never be any country that does to other countries what the United States did to Europe and the Global South after 1945. Now, that's why the United States opposed Keynes's policy and insisted on the International Monetary Fund as it's now structured. And I give all the details in my book, Super Imperialism. I believe that China would accept this principle as a basic criterion for its win-win philosophy. It has to offer other countries that they can win too by joining China and its Shanghai Cooperation Organization allies in a critical mass to be independent of the U.S. threats to attack China, Russia, and the strongest countries, so that then can pick up the control of all of the rest of the world. They have to realize that they need each other to be independent of this U.S. control. Well, China's Belt and Road Plan is based on quite different principles from those of the World Bank lending to maintain the world's specialization of labor between raw materials exporters, low-wage labor exporters, and food and industrial exporters. The railroads and ports and canals that China's developing are needed for a much more balanced economic profile than the US-sponsored division of production between raw materials and industrial economies. Now, these transportation facilities are the first step towards developing an inland economy as a whole, not merely a seacoast periphery to facilitate the exportation of oil, minerals, raw materials to the north. Countries are going to work up their own materials into their own industrial products. They're going to do what's called value added. That the West has concentrated. They're going to do for their own economies what the West have done for itself. They're going to use their raw materials for their own industry. The West is dependent on their raw materials, and they can say, well, we're going to be using our raw materials for our own development now, not to help your industry develop, because you've monopolized all the industry in the world and become a monopolist position. We have to develop our economic self-sufficiency and self-dependence in food, in basic industrial goods, water, technology. We've got to create for ourselves the same material conditions that has created your prosperity, and that is basically the economic plan that initially has to be funded by countries strong enough and with enough monetary reserves to power this. Now, I'm sure that that the West will do to China what it's done to Russia. I'm sure the West is going to grab all of China's $1 trillion of U.S. Treasury bonds and holdings in the United States. And all China can do will say, okay, then this money that you've grabbed will be part of the pot. We're going to nationalize, we're going to take all of the Western assets in China. And we realize that the rest that you've confiscated can be used to help compensate for the cancellation of all of the Global South debt. It's part of the whole pot. You grab what our civilization, our new civilization, has left as collateral for you. We're taking your investments here and that's part of calling it quits. It's not going to be equitable for everybody, but it's the only way in practice that can happen. Everybody's going to grab what is in their own country. But now that you know that the West has nothing on balance to offer, all they can do is take, and they can, because they have nothing to offer, all they can offer is the promise not to do to you what they did to Palestine, to Libya, to Venezuela, and Chile and Argentina. All you can do is shun them and say we're really there. The Americans are right. There is a clash of civilization, and we're having our civilization. You have yours. This trade-off is going to be part of the whole attempt to develop countries that have been kept in a underdeveloped neo-colonial, financial colonial state for the last 75 years. Now, just as the United States confiscated the international reserves of second major enemy, Russia, it's likely to do the same with China's reserves, as I mentioned. China's great countermove is the fact that the major sources of refined earth metals, computer technology, other metals and products that are already needed in the West. If the United States really says, okay, we're in an economic war, we're sanctioning you, Europe has already said, China, we don't want you to export more than we import. China can say, fine, no more exports of raw materials, no more exports of rare earth, no more exports of computers. If you really want a world break, you're not going to get any. Well, the Western economies will fall apart very, very quickly as the global majority goes its way, because the Western economies have been living off what they've taken from the global South and from Asia. And the result of their sanctions will be they've isolated themselves. They've created their own iron curtain, separating themselves, and they've been using this as if this is a threat to China, Russia, and Africa and Latin America. And the fact is, it's only a threat to its own society, its own populations, How will the United States and Europe economies function without the materials, the technology, and the money that they've been taking from the global South and from the rest of Eurasia from all of these decades? It can't do it. So the West is seeking to counter any potential move by China to protect itself by promoting its own economic self-sufficiency and independence from China. President Biden enacted huge tariffs against Chinese exports of solar technology, steel, and other products. The United States is doing just for itself just what it's prevented other countries from doing for themselves since 1945. Free trade was supported by the United States as long as it could undersell other countries. But once it deindustrialized, all of a sudden it's doing what it did to get wealthy in the 19th century. It's protective tariffs, government support, just as strong government support here as in China, but they refuse to call it socialism, unlike the 19th century. So that you're already seeing this drive for self-sufficiency in the United States is precisely what the U.S. neoliberal policy is opposed for the global South and other countries. But so before the United States can do this, is use your economic dominant power now to make the break now, not in the future. To succeed in this strategy, China needs to recognize that there's no middle ground between maintaining its own survival and surrendering to U.S. demands. China keeps trying to reason with the United States, saying, look, we can both gain if there's not an economic war and military war between us. The United States doesn't reason. It says, there's no economic gain, that we want all of the economic gain, not for you to have any. If you want any economic gain for yourself, we will go to war with you. We will spur Taiwan to fight to the last Taiwanese, just like we've spurred Ukraine to fight to the last Ukrainian against Russia. You cannot reason with the U.S. neoliberals, and Europe is left out of the picture totally in all of this. So China has to decide whether it will adopt U.S. neoliberal policies to protect itself as a major sponsor and financier of the global majority's break and to create a socialist alternative to the debt-ridden U.S.-European economic depression and austerity that's developing. There's no middle ground. There is no compromise that the United States will accept. And the U.S. military is strategizing its coming attack on China every week. And as long as it's doing that, you have to realize this is real economic war. Any negotiation you do is merely a U.S. Basic stalling so that it can put together its military attack, just like it stalled with Russia over Ukraine, while NATO put together its whole military attack planned for 2012 on Russia.